Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our weekly Wednesday Leadership Webcast. On behalf of the Monastery Foundation and the International Monastery Council, I'm Kathy Leach. I will be your host today, but I am joined by my most esteemed panel today. So thanks everyone for being here with us. I think everybody knows everybody at this point, but I will start with Jonathan Wolfe. Jonathan's a senior consultant with the Monastery Foundation. He's been working very closely with us on all the task force and making sure that we can help meet the needs of the many Montessori schools out there who are navigating the situation with schools and parents and teachers during this pandemic. I'm also joined, as we have been recently, by Tanya Reiskind, Associate Head of School at the Newgate School, our lab school. It's where we do all the experimenting, so you don't have to worry about that. So Tanya will be talking to us about lots of things that are happening at the Newgate School, because one of the reasons we have a lab school is so we can be real and we can be right in the trenches with all of you. So Tanya, thanks for being here. Also have with us Christine Lowry. Christine, also a senior consultant with the Monastery Foundation, offers many courses with us and also has been working diligently on task forces and helping parents, teachers, and many schools. And last but certainly not least, my colleague and friend Tim Selden, chair of the International Monastery Council, president of the Monastery Foundation, founder of both organizations, and really has been our mentor in looking at how we can use our responsive team to meet so many needs. So thanks everybody for being here today. Tim, did you have a couple of words you might want to share with everybody? I know you always have some words of wisdom, and I have to tell you, all the emails we get of appreciation, which we appreciate being appreciated, but so many people remember these Timisms. And I have to say this because I say to myself all the time, clarity is the key to success. And that's one of the things I learned from you 30 some years ago. And it's always in my mind. And there's several others like that. And then we keep getting these emails that say, I remember when Tim said, and it stays with people. So Tim, we're counting on you to have a few words for us today.
Oh, I think you can count on it. I'll definitely have a few. I'll just, let me just take a moment just to thank everyone who has been involved. On behalf of the Monastery Foundation and the IMC, there are hundreds of you out there who have been volunteering your time as well as our staff over the last 3 months. The best is yet to come. I think, as Churchill said, this is not the beginning of the end. This is perhaps the beginning of the beginning, or the end of the beginning, or whatever. The bottom line is we've got a long journey ahead, and we're here to help. If you're not already a member of the International Monastery Council and you're confused because of alphabet soup, let me just give you the quick reminder. The Monastery Foundation has been around since 1992. It was created by a group of us who really felt that there needed to be a support system really specifically aimed at parents from outside of any one association and its school leaders, again, independent of any of the associations, working with all of them. That in turn led one day in 1998 to a phone call where John Wolfe, my wife Joyce, and I received a call from John Stoops asking us to create a school accreditation program that was independent. That led to the formation of a membership organization that provides all kinds of day-to-day implementation of the values we teach at the Monastery Foundation. That's called the International Monastery Council. We do that not to replace any other organization, but to love them all and to be a common thread, a connecting tissue. So hopefully your school is a member of the IMC, or you are individually. If you're not, I really encourage you to join as a school. That's really what it was designed for, but we welcome you, one and all, whether you're a student member, an individual member, a school member. And let's carry on with today's focus, because this is part of our ongoing, I think we're now beginning our 5th year of these weekly webcasts year round, except on Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's Day, of Webcast for Monastery School Leaders.
Thank you, Tim. And today our topic is reopening. What are we thinking? I think we're all wondering what the heck is going to happen. How are we going to do this? We're hearing all kinds of things about what states may or may not require. And so, we really like to address from a number of perspectives, from the health and safety of, how do we protect our faculty and our students? How do we reopen with perhaps half of our enrollment? How does that become affordable? How do we take care of, the many different constituencies and make sure that we can address their concerns, as well as have teachers reoriented to coming back to perhaps some additional job responsibilities and the heavy responsibility of keeping everyone safe. So that's kind of the opening questions. I want to remind everyone that we have a GoToWebinar control panel, should be on the right-hand side. This is meant to be an interactive discussion. We do have some things to share with you, but we really want to be responsive to your questions. We want to hear from you on what is your school doing and planning, what's working, what's not, because part of what's been so wonderful about this response team has been that schools have shared with other schools. So we're learning as we go what's working with schools and what's not, and we can learn from each other's experiences. So go ahead and put your questions and comments in the question box that's on the control panel. If you click on that little triangle, it will open up and you can put your questions in there. I'll be monitoring that as we go through the next hour or so. Tanya, can you start by giving us some of the things you and your team have been working on and strategically planning in order to move forward and consider reopening?
Well, one of the things that we're all concerned about is the cleanliness and the hygiene. And so one of the things is that we're looking at what our vendors have been able to do for us, what we have still in stock, what things might be changed or used differently. We're having a frank conversation among the faculty about their emotional well-being in using some of these products and how they want to move forward in using them, how we're going to, talking about their fears and their emotional well-being in making decisions about how we're going to clean, how we're going to assess, how we're going to have sizes with children, and just starting the conversation is about the first thing we're doing. What have we been doing in the past that worked well for us? What changes do we see coming? And what are we currently capable of doing? If we had to open up today, what is our capacity and what could we do today? And what needs to be changed for when we will open up? And I think that's, we're going to bring it to reflective practice, which I know Jonathan's going to really help us with as well. So those are two things that we're looking at, is what do we currently have in store for what it looks like in terms of health and safety. I think the biggest thing for me as a head of school is reading everything that's coming from the CDC, coming from the science, coming from the state that we currently are in. And our school is in the state of Florida. So I'm trying to garner things from the Department of Education as well as the Department of Children and Family Services.
Thanks, Tanya. And I think each state, of course, will have its own unique requirements, let's say, and some will have more than others. And I think that what we want to do as Montessorians is be thoughtful about our way forward. So, of course, we want to consider if our state is requiring certain things, can we accommodate them and still do what's right for children, number one. And number two, if our state says to go back and we don't have very clear requirements, how will we make sure that we're taking responsibility above and beyond what our state is requiring? And Christine, I know you've done a lot. You and I have both read through many of the different states' potential requirements, and MPPI has done a brilliant job of putting together some thoughts on this. I've put that handout in the in the handout section, but how about you give us a little bit of your insight into what's been happening in the States?
Well, the main thing that I'm seeing is the very wide range of recommendations to requirements. And I am living in Colorado. The state rules and regulations are secondary to county health departments. So I don't know how much that is the situation in other states, but that's another consideration, is to be aware of the national information that we're hearing, as Tanya mentioned. Also be aware of your state information from your Department of Education and your Child Services agency, and then also looking at your public health regional or county agencies to see what they're recommending, because oftentimes they are overriding what might be coming from a state level.
So, okay, you know, we know that states are gonna have some different things, and some states currently, even some places in Canada that I've heard from, and places around the world, have already started reopening. And some of our Montessori schools, not very many, but some have stayed open for first responder, particularly at the early childhood level. I don't know of anybody at the elementary level, but at the early childhood level. And so if any of you are on the call or the webinar today who have stayed open, we'd love to hear how you've addressed some of these issues. And we're going to articulate these issues that, you know, some of the things that have been outlined and talk about them specifically. But before we get to that, I want to come to Jonathan, because you're always so good at looking at the sort of the forward thinking and how to, you know, really not get panicked over, oh my God, they're asking us to do what? You know, seatbelt children in, put them in what do you call the hula hoops?
Right.
Right?
Right.
You're a non-panic guy, so help us with that.
Thank you. Well, you know, there's the part of the equation that Tanya was referring to, you know, the health protecting equipment, but also we're Montessorians. So I just made myself, while Tanya and Kathy were talking, a list of some things that I think are sort of Montessori specific as we consider equipment to protect our children, or equipment that may be mandated, procedures or equipment that may be mandated by various government levels. I think we need to be asking the following questions. I'll try to go kind of slow here. How independently usable is this piece of equipment by children of different ages? You know, children, we want them to do as much for themselves as possible. Now, this may not always be perfect. We might need teacher help, but I still think we need to question, can a child negotiate this piece of equipment independently? Number two, of course, we need to look at the cost for the school, which is not child related, but it is related to doability. Does it really protect health? That's an obvious one. Does it support independent learning? If a child is encased in this piece of equipment or is bounded by a hula hoop, which some people have suggested, does this get in the way of independent learning? Does it impact the long work period in any way? Another aspect of independent learning, does it allow children for the full range of movement about the classroom and movement of their hands, since Montessori is about movement and cognition? How will this wearing this piece of equipment, especially for or being bounded by this particular thing, whether it's something around the child or the child wears, how will this affect the child emotionally? And will it produce the ability, whatever these things are, can children communicate with one another? As an example, some people are saying that if you're going to have masks for children, it would be ideal to have them be transparent so children can see each other's emotions and adults' emotions. So there's the emotional impact upon the child and their ability to communicate. Does whatever we're being asked to do, does it in fact fulfill government requirements? How will the parents feel about this? Because this will need to be communicated to parents. And some parents, of course, will go, unless we frame this very positively in support of their child's welfare and their child's learning, I don't want my kid having that around them or on them. And then, very importantly, how labor intensive will this be for teachers? I mean, we're all seeing teachers flirting on the edge of burnout these days with, on and on the marathon of online learning. So as we move back to on-campus operations, we need to look at whatever we are doing to accommodate what the government wants us to do to keep the children safe, the implementation of that and the equipment that's part of that. We need to look at this through the eyes of what is the orientation for the teacher, and how labor intensive is this for a teacher? So Kathy, these were just some of the criteria or filters that I was popping in my brain. There may be many, many more. And I think as good school leaders, we always need to be looking holistically, using systems thinking to think about, it's not just about the accommodation that the government's asking us to do, it's how will this affect children, teachers, and parents. We're in the people business.
John, I think that's one of the most important points we can make today. This is about the children. And if we can put systems in place that are responsive. I also put in the handout section the Monastery pedagogical principles that were developed out of great love and expertise and wisdom. Many, many Monasteryans on the teacher support and curriculum task force. They went above and beyond, and they have created a document that will long survive this pandemic. And I would consider that you look at each of those elements and think about, as a question, how close can we get to this? What's the criteria? Christine?
Kathy and John, may I add one more potential question to your fantastic list of questions, John? And that is, in most of the states that I have looked at, the requirement that they're looking at is a group size of no more than 10 children.
Right.
And certainly that has an impact on schools,
yep.
But it also has an impact on our children and on our teachers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Huge. Thank you, Christine.
That's an incredibly important part of it. I mean, we've got trauma here, as you often point out, Christine. We've got teachers that are traumatized as moms and dads and as human beings. We've got people who are traumatized as spouses of someone they love who may be ill or may be recovering or may be suffering economically, totally separate from their position as one of our Montessori guides. We've got children who are going to be affected and are being affected, whether they're showing it or not. And of course, we've got parents who are going to be all over the board, from deep mourning to deep anger and resentment, which they may take out on you and your teachers or their children, God forbid. Just, we have to know that all of this is part of what's going on, not only when we open up, it's going on right now. And it's going to get worse. This would be a good time to.
Kathy, you're muted.
This would be a good time, if your school doesn't already have one, to have access to somebody in the mental health profession who can begin to develop a relationship with your families as a whole, or a really good Montessori guide. Jonathan, Tanya, Christine, I've watched, Kathy, watched all four of you as an example sit in on community meetings as a friend of a school or as a paid consultant, and provide a lot of the functions that a mental health worker would provide. The bottom line is there'll be processing to do. And we as school leaders, we have to know it and expect it, like babies in diapers. And we have to breathe and we have to go with it. It's going to be part of the process of getting through this.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. So I have a question here from, Jonathan, Sarah LaValle. You know Sarah from works with Cindy, right? Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here, Cindy. Or Sarah. Will Jonathan share his long list of things to consider? Jonathan,
Of course, he.
Be
we
happy
can put it together.
I'll
And
type and send them over to Kathy and Tim, and we'll get them out.
yeah,
I'd like to comment on the list because I think what Jonathan's list brings to mind is about thinking about all the component parts we have to think about from a systems perspective. The emotional part for me when I'm answering these questions, either by myself to get a wrap my head around it, or in a team meeting with my team, is that we really need to start with the permission that no one has the right answers. We need to give ourselves permission to put things on the table that, as Montessorians, that's why this pedagogical guideline is so powerful, because sometimes we say, well, that's not Montessori. And the pedagogical guidelines at least contains the conversation so that we can feel that we can put bizarre things on the table. And a concrete example of that is, who in their right mind in the Montessori world would have ever thought that toddlers would have engaged with their toddler guide and each other in a Zoom room? And yet the toddlers at Newgate School are doing that. So is it pedagogical? Is it respecting them? Is it adaptable? Are we creating a sense of community? Is there some order to it? Is there an independence? We went down that list and we said, as long as we could answer these questions in some rational light, we were okay in holding true to our philosophy and our practice.
Well, Tanya, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that, you know, any psychologist will let us know that any of us children, adults who are under stress, when it comes to creative decision making, we are really talking here today about creative decision making as things unfold. The more stressed out we are, the more we have a tendency to make quick reactive decisions, or to avoid decisions, or not to take in the full picture. So I think it is our job as school leaders. I'm assuming we have mostly school leaders, but everybody is a leader in a school, you know, whether you're a teacher or an assistant teacher. It is our job to slow people down right now who are going to react to things and go, oh, we could never do that, or I don't want to do that, or that's not Montessori. All of that is kind of reactive energy. It's like, let's slow down, take a deep breath, and look at all the different things, all the different questions we need to answer to see how we negotiate this very delicate thing of doing things that are right for the children, right for health, right for the government, right for our families, right for our teachers, and right for the survival of our schools. That is as Tanya said, a systems thinking, slow it down, put your opinions to the side for a moment, and let's look at things with a fresh light. That's the only way that our schools are going to get through this, is to slow down and look at things in a very calm, creative light, and then we'll figure it out.
And the other thing that I really love about what you just said, Tanya, is that, yes, it's about the system, but it's about the relationships that we have within that system. And we know so much about the importance of relationships for children, for parents, for us, for our staff, with the government. And you know, and it really is about, that is where we have to start. So I love your idea of, we have to give ourselves permission to put things out there, to let everybody's voice be heard. And then with that slow, measured, okay, let's put it all out there and let's think about it approach that you're talking about, John. It sounds like just a beautiful way of approaching this.
Let me just add a little bit in that. Our friend Rianne Eisler talks about the idea of Montessori schools being partnership communities. And what that means is, whether our school is nonprofit and governed by a board, or privately owned and you're maybe the manager for the owner, or you're the owner, operator, or whether you're public or charter, really none of it matters. Partnership doesn't mean these people have cash equity in your business, but it does mean a spirit that Nancy Rambush would have called authoritative. In other words, you're going to have parents at times taking pot shots at your staff because they're really emotionally overwrought, and it may spill over into something they say or communicate, where your teachers may just pick up on it and sense it, and it may or may not be intended. Partnership doesn't mean your parents get a vote. It doesn't mean they're always going to agree on whatever you're doing. It's the idea of treating them not as customers, but as stakeholders, and not that the majority of their opinion wins, but that they all have the right to be heard and treated with grace and courtesy, and that's the culture we're trying to teach children anyway. We just run the school the way we run a classroom, hopefully.
Hopefully. I want to divert to some of the questions and comments that are coming in fairly rapidly, and I want to make sure we engage our participants and respond, because that's really the main goal, and it really does tie into some of the considerations for reopening. And one of the most prevalent questions I'm seeing here has to do with this limited group size. So smaller groups mean more groups, which leads to staff shortage and space shortage. Are schools decreasing enrollment, or are they creating more classrooms in response to new ratios? There's several questions around this. Splitting classes in ways that are typically contrary to three-year groupings in order to meet the health requirements is an option. That's David Aguilar. Thanks for being here, David. And a couple other things that are just related to what are the logistics around this smaller group size. I've heard from a lot of schools that have some very creative solutions, but I'll open it up to the panel as well, because I know that you've all been working with this as well. Any thoughts on group size? Okay, I'm going to go for it, and you guys.
I'm sorry, I have thoughts about group size.
I have lots of thoughts, and they're in three buckets. One is equity, which children get to join us and which children don't, or when. One is surrounded about multi-age. Why is the magic number 10? Can't it be 12 or 9? Or what makes 14 any different? That's a real, because I'm sure it's arbitrary with some statistical evidence. One of my professors once said, where's the data? Show me the efficacy, right? And so is 10 really where's the efficacy behind that? And then the third thing I'm concerned about most is not only are they encouraging us to have smaller group sizes, but they want the group to be with the same adult. They don't want any adult movement, and they want siblings to kind of be, and I can understand the efficacy of that. So where does the multi-age come into play? Where does teacher hours come into play if you have an extended day program or an early day program? There's so many more questions that need to be filtered through in the process of the discussion with your team at your school, with your parents, to make the best decision for you. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about, I'm thinking about how to guide the conversation at Newgate School.
Okay.
The other question about the 10 children in a group is the room size. If you've got 10 children in a room that's 300 square feet versus 10 children in a room that's 1,000 square feet, we're looking at a very, very different scenario and situation there.
There's been a couple of comments about that. I'll respond to Christine. There are, and I think Cindy might have some information, and Cindy Acker is on today.
Great.
We need to have her. Cindy, I think, was the one that talked about that in California they could have a double group size if the room was big enough, as long as there was some sort of a barrier that kept the groups in their own space. Cindy, I apologize if I've misrepresented this or if it wasn't you, but I believe that it was that there's some allowances being made, but again, that could be not only state to state, it could be county to county. It could be licensing regulator to licensing regulator, right? So when you do have your proposal on how you will meet these things, I would always suggest being proactive and, you know, finding out, will your state or your county or whomever allow for some of these things.
And then what's the equity in outdoor environments? I mean, some of us have outdoor environments all year round and some people don't. And what about city schools that don't, I mean, who are on top of each other with multiple levels and have elevators to get to school? I mean,
Yeah.
These are all really good topics you're bringing up. There's another one we want to remember. We are probably in most cases either regulated by something like a Department of Health or Child and Family Services, the group that regulates childcare as an industry in your state and county or city. And we may also be regulated by our state or provincial Ministry of Education or Department of Ed. These things that are being thrown out are going to affect an entire industry: public schools, private schools, charter schools, childcare centers, for-profits, nonprofits. And I think at the moment, what we should be doing is not assuming any of the stuff we're hearing is the way it's going to be, because I think people are throwing stuff against the wall to try to begin a conversation, to begin to get their heads wrapped around how this is going to work. Those of you who run childcare centers know that you couldn't possibly exist if you only can have half capacity or quarter capacity in your building, just like restaurants. But it's probably, it's the kind of thing where we've got to watch what's going on. We've got to think about the health risk, what's really going on there. We have to add in another thing we haven't really touched on yet, other than mentioning it once, which is legal liability, and whether or not if someone gets sick, whether it's a staff member, a visitor, a child, whatever, whether we are somehow responsible. And we have to know we're part of a larger industry. And Cindy, if she was unmuted, would be urging us to, if you're not already tied in to the various professional organizations that represent the industries that are working in your state, the coalitions of child advocacy and child care centers and private schools and charter schools, probably a good time to get tied into them, because that's one of the things MPPI is doing really well. They're monitoring what is being said. They're trying to give some input, but at the local level, where the rubber hits the road, you want to be at the table, or at least know that your interests are being represented at the table. And then it ultimately comes down to you as a school and a school board member, owner, whatever, to figure out what's your position going to be, whatever regulations they throw at you.
Yeah, I think that these, I'm sure Cindy has said something here. I think that although some of the things we may need to consider seem to be challenging and interrupting, taking care of our health is also a key feature of practical life. Mm-hmm. Years ago, extra hand washing and disinfecting seemed challenging, but it's now commonplace. We have a dance to do to determine how we safeguard the spirit of Montessori and the lives of our teachers and children. Beautiful, really well said, Cindy, and thank you for the reminder of that. Stacy Cataldo, this is an interesting point, so I want to bring this up because I've talked to a lot of people about this. Stacy says, just spoke with our insurance company yesterday. Liability depends on insurance carrier. Very vague at this time. I would advise everyone to be in contact with their insurance carriers. First of all, for business interruption insurance. It was denied for almost everybody in the beginning, and I'm hearing from more and more schools that have revisited it and even been approached by their insurance broker to reconsider resubmitting the claim, even though they all said no in the beginning. They're starting to think about it because there's potential for class action suits if they don't think about it. So some of the carriers are thinking about it. So it's always worth revisiting that. And I think, when we look at liability, we can't, we've got our resident attorney here, Tanya, and Cindy for that matter, who would, I think, always advise that you want to get legal advice and be clear about what our liability is. Only so much we can do to mitigate liability, right? We want to be thoughtful and prepared, but sometimes people sue us. Jonathan?
Yeah, Kathy, a couple things that additional areas of inquiry, because we're really talking about, are we asking the right questions here? Some schools are talking about doing a hybridized program where some children, a smaller number, are on campus because of regulations. Another group, if it's staffable and deliverable, are at home doing some online learning. So everybody feels they are getting learning. So just you want to look at, is there a possibility of doing some hybridization where everybody, it's not like you're either on campus or you're not learning. No, people will still be learning off campus. And then the other thing that I think we need to think about is some parents, regardless of regulations, will make a choice. I want my child in school, or under these conditions, I don't want my child in school. So that also needs to be factored into the thinking. Well, yeah. I just want to make give you a leadership communications or a brainstorming resource. If you go to hbr.org, which is harvardbusinessreview.org, and Google brainstorming through questions, you're going to come up with a couple articles that are rather recent, the last couple of years, that when you put a group of people together and you want to do a brainstorm for answers, don't brainstorm for answers, because it limits people's creativity, because people are going, well, I might come up with a dumb answer. What are all the questions we could ask about transitioning back to campus, giving the possible regulations? That's the question. And you just let people dump questions. Well, we need to find out what the government regulation is here. We need to find out about this piece of equipment. It's brainstorming should be done with creative questions about gathering information, not about answers. That shuts people's creativity down. So it's just a leadership process that I found really effective when I read it.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Couple other things here. Let's see. Madeline says, PA, Pennsylvania released that childcare does not need to follow the DOH guidelines for 50% capacity. So when we are allowed to open in the yellow phase, we will not be restricted on numbers. So that's news to me. I hadn't heard Pennsylvania's. And other people are saying that, possibly the 10-child thing, does it include the guide? From what I've heard, yes, it does include the guide. And some of the creative solutions, just to give some ideas, because I think we can't only ask the questions. We have so many questions just like you do, but we have heard some creative solutions as well. So some of the things in the spirit of what Jonathan was sharing, half the children outside, half the children inside. I've heard having a morning work period where half the children come for the morning and the other half come for the afternoon, with adequate time to disinfect and leave in between. I have heard of staggered days where, an A team comes Monday and Wednesday and the B team comes Tuesday and Thursday, or Monday, Tuesday, A team, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 days in a row is the B team, so that the different teacher, so if somebody gets the virus, you've got a team that is tracked and the other team hasn't been affected. And so there are, but all of these have to be looked at in the container of, and with the questions of, can we do this and be in integrity with what's good for children? And will it do harm? But we do have to be thinking of creatively and differently. I've also heard some different things about the use of masks. So some public health officials are saying that everybody 2 and up will have to wear a mask. As Jonathan made a really good point, we have young children who read our faces and our emotions and each other's. This is all part of mirror neuron, building empathy and compassion. This is the neuroscience of social connection. For the children not to have that because we're all now covered, how will that affect our children? And are there options for clear or the clear face shields? Is that less cumbersome for children? So those are the kinds of things we need to be offering. I will say that we have to always put safety first, and please be careful about using homemade versions of clear plastic that could harm children. I mean, people are trying to get creative, but I always want to have the context has to be, is this really safe? And, sometimes we laugh about some of the silly ideas that come up, and it's okay to laugh, but let's be really clear about what's safe for children. Some of the other ideas I've heard, because of disinfecting in between the use of materials. So I'm envisioning, a toddler class or a primary classroom where children touch everything, right? And so everything has to be disinfected between, and there's only certain products we can use that are safe to use around children, and they're not available. And so we have this myriad of things, and some of the solutions that have come up with some of the schools I've talked about, they have what they're calling a warm area. When a child finishes using an activity, it goes into a particular area that's not allowed to be accessed by anybody other than the disinfecting person who's disinfecting things and putting them back on the shelves and helping to, obviously we may not need as many assistants during this time. And so maybe keep somebody employed and helps with the, I don't know how practical it is for a teacher who's alone with 9 other early childhood and or toddler children to be constantly in the mode of wiping surfaces and disinfecting materials and be emotionally and physically available for children. So some of those kinds of thoughts triggered my thinking, because to be honest with you, when I first read some of these things, I thought I just wouldn't reopen. And that's just not practical thinking either. So I appreciate people thinking out of the box and giving us some ideas. Another one is food prep. We probably we'll be very limited in food prep. If your program serves meals and snacks and things like that, chances are you're going to have them come from home. Okay, then we have lunch boxes and lunch bags that aren't allowed to be touched by anyone else or touch anything else and have to be disinfected. So what are the procedures we would need to do? It's like task analysis, like everything else.
Well, and Kathy, it's also vector management. I mean, so if you have 10 children with 10 different kitchens bringing in 10 different vector trajectories, is that more prudent than the school purchasing food items from one source and cleaning it ahead of time and having it prepared? I mean, that's where it's going to be a health benefit analysis for what we're trying to, the goal for keeping them safe. I mean, it's all going to come back to this safety issue, but vector management. And what I heard from one of the doctors at University of Arizona and how they're approaching opening up their institution, and I thought it was powerful, is it's going to be testing, training, and tracing. And for little people, for the 2-year-olds, we need to be able to trace not only them but their things as they bring them in. And do you have a warm area for all their things? And then
to bring a lot of things.
Remember that if the home is shedding bacteria, the virus, it's on their clothing.
Right.
One of the best environments for the stuff to live in is fabric, as I understand it. One of the things that, I sent Tanya a text this morning just saying, have you thought about non-touch thermometers? Because they're going to go into real short supply like toilet paper. And there is toilet paper. How are you going to handle toilet paper when you reopen?
Supplies are a strategic issue. And
paper,
Go ahead, Christine.
No, I'm sorry, any kind of paper goods.
Paper goods are disinfectants. We're
Right.
not allowed to use hand, at least in Florida. I hear from many states who are not allowed to use hand sanitizers with children. So, these are the kinds of things that we really need to be to thinking about and thinking outside the box. And it happens really from the moment, and Christine, you and I are going to work on this project of putting some of these things. We're going to send out a document that has a matrix of some of these potential state requirements and some brainstormed solutions, right? Some ideas to get you thinking. There's no one answer for any school. This is really going to be unique, but as Tanya says, you bring the questions and the ideas, and John gave us a great resource for brainstorming. But sometimes you just need a starting point. I know for me, like I said, I was stuck. So getting this document, I think, is going to be helpful. And I know Cindy has created some protocols for her school with phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and kind of how they will implement this, including training teachers. And so all of these things are just essential in figuring out where are we going to get the supplies is at the heart of this. We can't open if it's not safe and we don't have what we need and we're not assured that we're going to get what we need. Tim, you're talking about those thermometers, and I because of a family situation, Rob, my husband, has been researching these thermometers because he needs them on his job sites. And they're the kind that don't touch the forehead. They're the kind that you can just walk by. And right now, before this webcast, they were available. Perhaps after this webcast, because there's 170 people here, it may not be available. So, but that's part of your whole strategic piece. It's not just one thing. You're looking for them not only when you open, but will you be able to resupply regularly for an affordable price? Watch for price gouging. That's what's happening. Even Amazon, I've heard from people who work with Amazon, and they're looking at all the fraud that's happening right now because of these supplies. So third-party sellers are on there selling masks and sanitizer, but they're not delivering anything. And so, we've got to be really smart about how do we do this. Maybe Tim should start a Monastery Foundation supply requisition.
I've already gotten an email from Toby Gress asking if we were going to bulk purchase Chromebooks.
Well,
Tim,
I'm wondering, do we have, there's such power in numbers, right?
Tim's got this at his house, this huge recreational vehicle. He could just drive around the country, kind of like a good humor man. It'd be great, Tim, in your spare time.
Absolutely.
But the other thing that occurs to me is that, yes, we have to think about this as the Montessori community, but we're not the only part of the society that's thinking about opening up. And so as restaurants are opening, as stores are opening, as bowling alleys are opening, they all are going to have to be looking at what are just the paper goods and the cleaning goods that they're going to be required to have. So, our community is competing. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but each individual kind of community is looking at these same kinds of questions and these same kinds of solutions and regulations when there is going to be limited supply.
Okay, Lindsay Holderfield says Tim's TP supply truck. Okay.
I'm going to ride around the country like Paul Revere, my little Icelandic horse.
Casa de TP.
Johnny Appleseed.
Casa.
Go ahead, John.
We'll call it Casa de TP.
I'm glad
one of the things that's been brought up by Kathy is the idea that you may want to look, as Cindy did, at the issue of approaching your insurance company for business interruption insurance in the same way. And by the way, you really want to weigh that out before you submit the claim, because one of the things that our agent in Florida warned us is when you're an insurance company, if your entire insured base is wiped out at the same time, the companies go bankrupt or they withdraw from your state. That's what happened in Florida few years ago when we had 4 hurricanes in a row, most of our insurance industry disappeared.
Right.
But in the same way, you really should look at the local level at making bulk purchases if you can of equipment. I am all in favor of the Monastery Coalition of Tennessee or any of the other alliances of trying to put together large enough orders that you might reasonably drive the price down. On the other hand, it may have the opposite effect, but be thinking ahead, not at the last minute. The other thing is you really want to think about the currents that are pulling us in different directions. To survive, you're going to need to open. You can't continuously hold your breath underwater. You're going to have to reopen. There's going to be families that don't want any part of this. They literally will not send their children to preschool anywhere, anyhow, won't bring a nanny into their home, period. Others will say nanny's a good idea, school is not. Someone else will say grandma will move down from Massachusetts, she'll take care of the kids. There are going to be a lot of changes. It'll also be economic. There'll be families that feel like they need to conserve money. Childcare goes. That's what happened in 2008. Lots and lots of people withdrew from the childcare industry. On the other hand, as I've said in other broadcasts, there are going to be fewer spaces available in childcare centers for lots of reasons, including some of the ones we're talking about today. So what has been a commodity is going to become a precious commodity to those families who either are forced to work because they don't work from home and they need someone to watch their kids, and it's a lot cheaper to send them to a child care center than it is to hire someone to work for you in the home full time, or they're going crazy. Even if they could afford it, they want the kids out of the house. And that's another one of the issues we're dealing with a lot of families. So we have to weigh out, and we're going to need to be making decisions week by week, continuously in waves as we approach June, July, August, September, and into the year. We're going to all be trying to navigate through these waters, and we need to hold each other's hands and be thinking rationally. And I love John's way of thinking of it. The HBR, Harvard Business Review, brainstorming questions rather than solutions is a great place to start because we are riddled with questions.
Yeah, that's Cindy has said that she is also starting a white paper, and that also if you apply to one of the vendors who is supplying hospitals, you can get approval to be in that group. So you might want to check out your vendors and see if that's a special designation in your area or who you're doing business with. And I think we should follow up and see if Cindy will come on our webcast. She has a lot to offer. She's been doing a lot of this research, and I'd love to have her on so when her schedule allows. I know she's a very busy lady, so we'll get in touch with Cindy and see what Jonathan?
I'm wondering, since to follow Tim's thought that this is really about scenario planning, contingency planning, getting out ahead of the wave by thinking what ifs, and if this happens, then we'll do that and we'll be supplied with this. Maybe it's time to do a little promotion or communication of 3 events that are coming up. And Kathy, you can tell the dates and the exact titles, but Dr. John Moncure and Dr. Valeda Weiss and Michael Bourne from St. Croix are going to shortly do a live interactive, I think it's is it 2 sessions, Kathy?
2 sessions.
2 sessions on contingency planning, how to really systematically think that if it goes this way, we'll do this. If it goes this way, we'll do this. So we're going to plan for both of these. And that is coming up when, Kathy?
That is Wednesday, the 6th, which is tomorrow, part 1. No, today.
It's today.
What's the official title so people can track it?
Okay, let me get that. That title is called Charting Your Path Back to On-Campus Operations Post-COVID-19. And that is a 2-part. So today at 4 p.m. and then next Wednesday, the 13th at 4 p.m. Both of those are taking place. And then the next one is, we did some of it yesterday, systems thinking with, if you want to talk about that, I'll tell you there's a follow-up next week. So
Mary Beth Ricks of the Bowman School in California and Andrew Cutt of the Oneness Family School are doing something about how to think in terms of all the different systems in your school as you plan to move and transition into a change of operations. And that's a wonderful way of thinking. And then the third one, which I'm not sure is scheduled yet, is Christina Torres and George Markham will be doing something on what's called after action review, stepping back after you make a decision and go, what did we learn? Do we need to quickly adjust course so we don't get into habits of ineffective thinking and decision making? All of those three techniques, systems thinking, scenario planning, and after action reviews or continuous feedback loops, sometimes it's called, is critical in being an adaptive decision maker in such a crazy fluid time.
yeah. And I believe that they are actually scheduled on one of our Wednesday webcasts.
Wonderful.
So that's coming up, I believe, in 2 weeks. They're scheduled for that one. So they'll be on as guests for that.
I just put in into, I'm hoping everyone just saw, into the chat or the question box, I put the link to register for the Zoom talk that Val and John and Michael are doing today at 4 p.m. Eastern time. I forgot to put the title first, so the title follows in order. And then I put the link to the Monastery Foundation's urgent news and announcement page, which is where you can always go to look at what's coming up. These will be recorded since they're not going to be private stories of individual problems. We will make those recordings publicly available. So you can look for them either on the Monastery Foundation's YouTube channel, usually within 24 hours, and we'll usually post them on the Monastery Foundation's group. What do we call it? Conversations?
The Monastery Foundation Conversation Group, and it also is on the Monastery Foundation Facebook pages.
Kelsey, can you please confirm the time for today's event? Because on the website, it says 4 o'clock Pacific time. Or no, it doesn't. It's got EST. Never mind. We've got it. 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today, and it will be recorded and it will be something to see. I myself will be attending as well. I'm looking forward to it. They've done a lot of work on this. And I can tell you all, I mean, we're coming to an end of our time. We have so many of your unanswered questions, and many of you are coming up on, you know, tuition is going to be due for next school year coming up, many of you on June 1st, the initial payment. And, you know, there's questions about, do we remind people? And what if they try to get out of their contract? Do we not remind them? So can I please ask my panel, would you continue this topic next week, even in my absence? I think that this is a, you know, we really want, and hopefully Christina and I might be able to have some more done on this other doc and have it ready for folks. We have shared a couple of things in the handouts today to get you started, but we really want to bring some practical ideas and thoughts. Tanya?
Can we invite Cindy next week?
I think that we have to invite Cindy. I'll send her an email right now.
Can we draft her?
Pardon?
Can we draft her?
We've been trying to do that for years.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that for years. She actually was on her way to, she's presenting on another webinar, so she had to leave a little bit early, but
we appreciate everything she does.
Yeah.
I think we should also mention there's something that a group of us are preparing that we'll be sending out information about very soon. We're just waiting for a few more pieces, but so many of you are asking for one-on-one consultation that all of us who are Monastery Foundation senior consultants, many more than are on the screen right at the moment, agreed that what we will do is put together cohort groups. And John, what are we calling it?
I think the official title to look for is Leadership Strategies in a Time of Crisis. And essentially what we're going to try to do ideally, if enough people are interested, is we're going to be putting together very small cohorts of school leaders, no more than 12. And if possible, we're going to try to configure each cohort according to school size, like similar schools, similar size schools and schools of similar program levels, led by a senior consultant of the Monastery Foundation. And the basic flow of these weekly 90-minute small cohort sessions will be opportunities to talk about a particular school development or transition or strategy issue that that particular group of schools wants to talk about. That will be, so it'll be thematically driven. There will also be an opportunity for each school to present its current challenges to get support from the senior consultant as well as the cohort of school leaders. So it's going to be very, very tailored and adaptable to the needs of your particular school in size and characteristic, and like-minded people going through like-minded things.
And individual consultation is always available. I mean, I can't say always, not 24 hours a day, but somewheres in the world, there's one of us awake, right?
Yeah, we try. We're here to help, right?
All
But
right.
yeah, many schools would like the individual consulting, and we understand that, and we can certainly provide that. These cohorts are really meant to capitalize and get the most value really out of our consulting capacity, share the resources of the Monastery Foundation. And we really do, as a consulting team, share ideas and thoughts. So you get the value not just of the one consultant you work with, but you really get the value of the whole team. And I, for one, appreciate being part of a team as a consultant. It really does help and enrich what we can offer. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming today. We will do part 2 of this next week. We will invite Cindy to be with us as well. And if you do need anything in the meantime, don't hesitate to reach out, and we will hopefully get you the right information. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Stay healthy.
Bye, everyone. Yes, stay healthy. Be safe.
Safe.